We have Vincent, who's going to present EuterPen, Unleashing Creative Expression in music score writing. And take it away, Vincent.
All right.
Hello
everyone.
Thank you, Brian, for the
Je
introduction. My name is Vincent Clavé, and I represent this work on behalf of my colleagues, Catherine Tondal from University of Toulouse, and Caroline Appel and Emmanuel Pietriga from University of Paris. EuterPen, sorry, with a French accent, is a music notation program prototype which allowed us to show how interactive surfaces can lower constraints over musical notation and truly support composers in their creative process. As you may know, music notation programs are used a lot in Western culture by composers who want to write and share their music. But these programs are strongly structured. They force composers to work on their final product, the music score, and do so by imposing many notation rules and automatic adjustments on the symbols and global layouts. All of this structure is useful to produce a legible and high-quality score, which follows the rules of Western written music. But it also impedes the more creative stages of the composition process, because composers need flexibility to generate ideas. So instead of relying only on their music notation program, they often get away from it and its constraints, and use a diverse set of tools which better match how they conceive music. Last year, in our paper, Challenges of Music Score Writing and the Potentials of Interactive Surfaces, we interviewed 9 composers and identified 3 ways in which interactive surfaces could help composers. First, allowing users to temporarily break the score's linear flow of states and adapt the layout to the specific task at hand has the potential to help them try things out. Then, allowing users to temporarily break the score's homogeneity and work with different types of notation and content, and especially handwritten notation, has the potential to help them capture fleeting ideas, but also differentiate between work in progress and finalized music. And finally, allowing users to break down musical elements and manipulate them at a finer granularity has the potential to hit their workflow and enrich their experience. So we wanted to investigate these opportunities further and started with a prototyping phase of 4 months on Microsoft Surface Studio 2. Then we reconnected with composers through a participatory design workshop to help inform our design. This was followed by a second prototyping phase of 4 months, at the end of which I conducted interviews with composers to evaluate our design. And their feedback gave credibility to most of our choices, but also allowed us to make some final improvements on the prototype. For the workshop, we invited 2 professional composers to come to the lab for a half-day session. We showed them a quick overview of the prototype and video demonstrations of the features, which led to discussions about their relevance and how they were mapped to interactions. And as we encouraged them to experiment with the prototype and explain things on their own material, we were able to gather a lot of detailed feedback and iterate on our features, but also generate new ones. For instance, the composers reacted positively to the infinite canvas feature, and while one saw it as an ID box where he could organize his ideas, the other liked its potential to be a storage space and wished to put as many resources as possible in it, especially foreign content like PDF files. But it also led to the realization that opening unconstrained spaces between states weren't enough and we needed to add a more global space. They liked the cohabitation between handwritten and engraved notation, and the fact that handwritten notation is not automatically transformed, but actually interpreted in the background. This way, it can be listened to directly or be used to search for similar motifs among engraved notation. A requested feature was the ability to switch back and forth between engraved and handwritten notation in order to recall the process that led to what's written on the score. They were also interested in the ability to manipulate specific literary attributes, like pitch and rhythm, especially to copy and paste more efficiently, and explained that sequences could be dragged outside of the score and into the pencils mentioned earlier. Finally, they wondered how it could help them see hidden patterns in their score, but were worried about the visibility of those patterns. So this is something I investigated further. Now, after another 4 months of design and prototyping, we invited a broader set of professional composers to validate our approach through online interviews based on a questionnaire illustrating the features. And the composers had, again, a lot of feedback. I show you some quotes from the composers in regard to the respective features and the final version of these features in EuterPen. For instance, two composers emphasize the need to have more control over the layout adjustments, to focus on composing rather than rectifying the software's choices. Same goes for the possibility to insert bars free of any constraints, for instance, without any rhythmic signature. Let me show you what it looks like. Here, I insert unconstrained space in the score, more or less equivalent to 3 bars, but without measure bars, because I can just draw them later. I can also adjust manually the density of a measure and fine-tune the layout when I want to. Regarding the pensives, so the unconstrained spaces which are between staves and around the score, composers could all think of concrete applications they would have for them. Some really enjoyed the ability to have the fixed, stable version of their material on the score and their work in progress in those drop spaces. Some like the idea of having no key nor rhythmic signature in these spaces and use them freely as blank paper sheets or compare them to a laboratory in the middle of the score. Here, I drag the handle of a global pensive next to the score and carve 2 other pensives in between staves. So we call them pensives as a reference to the Harry Potter world, because you can drop in them what you have in mind. Concerning the need for multiple types of content in and around the score, a composer complained about currently having a lot of memos in his phone and not being able to put them in the score. Another wished to sketch diagrams to convey positions and movement to musicians. And the third one wanting to mix handwritten annotations and evolving content, explaining to me that when the work in progress happens in rehearsal and someone is not there, he would like to leave an instruction manual. So in the final version of EuterPen, you can leave sketches, PDF files, and of course handwritten notation, which you can then drop from the pensives to the score. But you can also import audio files or pictures to have them close to your work and drop them in the score to hear or see what it looks like, or use them as placeholders. One of our goals was to give more power to handwritten notation and let it cohabit with engraved notation. A composer explained that thanks to this cohabitation, he wouldn't have to remember if a passage is the final version or if it is just a draft, because having both kinds of notation makes it very easy to see if a passage needs to be reworked. Another composer liked that handwritten notation could be listened to and would use this with his students to add suggestions or variations. Because you can listen to handwritten notation alone if it is selected, but you can also listen to it in context. Together with engraved notation. And for this cohabitation to work, handwritten notation can be turned into engraved notation at any time and turned back into handwritten state if necessary. So it's not just a cancel option. You can do it back and forth as you want. During the workshop, we discussed about manipulating relaxed selections, which could be useful for advanced copy and paste actions. And in the interviews, it was further confirmed by a composer who explained that currently, when repeating a rhythmic formula, he has to edit the notes one by one. And it's a lot more laborious than specifying upfront what he's interested in. Another one explained that he would use it to erase and replace attributes when there's been a mistake, instead of starting all over again. Here, let's say that I'm really interested in the pitches of a sequence and not its rhythm. So I copy the pitches, starting the lasso selection on a note head, and paste them on another sequence with a different rhythm. Another feature mentioned during the workshop was the pattern matching opportunities and the low visibility composers usually have over the content. Since then, I designed a minimap of the score showing the selection as a blue dot and its matches as a yellow dot. Once again, it received positive feedback during the interviews, having the potential to help them find small pieces of material hidden in different parts of the score. Here, I search for a pattern focused on rhythm And then I search for a pattern focused on pitches. I also rely on the minimap to see the matches and quickly navigate to them. So if you're interested in this, I've put on my website the demo video of all the features, including many that I did not present today, and also the code of the prototype, which runs on Microsoft Surface Studio. Thank you for listening, and don't hesitate to reach out to me this week by email if you want to chat about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Vincent.